G'day, team. Welcome to another edition of Coach's Thoughts. Uh, Today, we're going to talk about functional movements. So, we're going to dive straight into it. We're really being quite specific today. This will probably be a bit of a shorter episode. I just felt like the word functional and functional movements is so used in CrossFit and the fitness industry that it'd be important to understand what the definition within CrossFit is, which is a definition given by Greg Glassman, and then understand, I guess, how to apply it and how to think about it. Because yeah, there's some errors in how we think about functional movements at times. So I'm gonna get straight into it, and we're gonna talk about defining functional movement. So in CrossFit, we do functional movements because of their potency. That's why we do them. They have more bang for buck. They give us more results, and there's a reason they give us more results. However, there's a spectrum of functionality. It's not like there's a list of movements that are functional and then there's a list of movements that are not functional. Even though you might hear people say those terms before, and I've even said that before, it really is a sliding scale because of how we define functional movements. What better terms are: a movement is more functional or a movement is less functional. And then there's also a secondary piece about the value of movements, but I'm going to talk to that in a moment. I don't want to jump too far ahead. So we define functional movements by their ability to do the following. They can move large loads, long distances quickly. And this gives us this equation that you see on the screen right now. Functional movements, when I use the large loads, long distances quickly definition given to us by Greg, I can build an equation for average power, which is force, distance, and time. So force times distance divided by time. Don't get too worked up about this equation, but what's worth understanding is that when I move something further and I can move it heavier and I can do it in less time, that becomes more functional. Therefore, I would choose a movement as a more functional option because of its ability to be loaded more, or its ability to be done further, or its ability to be done quickly, or a combination of all of those things. And we're gonna, already you're probably thinking of some movements, and we're gonna do some comparison work with this. Um, yeah, as I said, that gives us average power. And I would determine a movement's functionality by its ability to produce large amounts of this average power. I have some examples coming, so I'm trying not to get drawn into them. But let's think about a movement which is appearing in it appeared to, the day I'm recording this is the day of the 24.3 Open. So let's think about the thruster. In the thruster, you take the barbell from the bottom of the squat to overhead. So the bar moves a long way, almost as far as it can move. You can load the thruster pretty well. We're talking relative for a person's strength. Like the weight that I could put on a thruster is more weight than what I could put on, say, a tricep extension. Yeah. And I can do thrusters quickly. I can do them like they're programmed in this open workout. I can do them in sets of 10 for time. And 10 thrusters at a challenging weight for you through full range of motion is going to be a more functional effort than 10 tricep extensions, which can't be loaded, doesn't move very far. And I guess you could do them quickly. But again, the maths, the equation would not be as potent as the thruster. So these are the variables we're looking at to decide if a movement is functional. Can we move it with weight? And sometimes it's just your body weight, hey, which is fine. Your body weight's still weight. Can we move it a decent distance? And then can you do it in a way which, allows you to accumulate repetitions quickly? And that would make a movement functional. So there's like some of you probably thinking quickly and thinking, oh, well, so does everything have to be done for time? Not necessarily. Like let's think about a 1 RM deadlift. The bar moves from the floor to your hips, so it still moves a fair way. Obviously, a 1 RM deadlift, there is huge amounts of weight. And then a 1 RM deadlift can be done in, let's say it takes 2 or 3 seconds to get the bar up from the ground to your hip. So all of a sudden, we still have a very functional output, but it doesn't necessarily have to be this like 4-time piece. There's just still a time component to the effort, even if you're not timing it. If it moves heavier, further, or faster, it becomes more functional. That's the thing worth noting. So let's look at the snatch versus the bicep curl. And I've already done the thruster versus the tricep, but let's think about why the snatch is more functional than the bicep curl. To be clear, I'm not saying the bicep curl has no value. I'm just saying it's not as functional as the snatch for these reasons. Think about the distance the bar moves in the snatch from the ground. If you squat snatch it, it goes into a squat and then overhead. Think about the distance it moves in a bicep curl. Think about the weight for somebody who's proficient at the squat snatch versus the weight in a bicep curl. And then think about the time. So the snatch is a very fast and powerful movement. I know the time would depend on how many repetitions you're doing and things like that. But in terms of how much time it takes me to cover the distance we talked about, it's going to take me significantly less time. So the take here now is not that, hey, you should do snatches and you shouldn't do bicep curls. That's not the point of us addressing this functional movement piece. The point is the snatch, because of the mathematics of our equation, is more functional than the bicep curl. Is the bicep curl still worth doing? Yes, it has a number of benefits, but it is not as functional as the snatch. So at this point, there is a discussion, and this is where the discussion bleeds into one of variance about, okay, Ed, so you're telling me I can figure out if a movement's more functional than another movement. And my answer to that is yes. So, Ed, should I always do the more functional option? And the answer to that is no, because you won't be embracing variance if you don't. Also, certain movements have outcomes which improves our overall functionality. So the example that I'm going to give here is something like a handstand. A handstand, by the mathematics, is not quote unquote a very functional movement. And if you could think about the application of a handstand in real life, it, I guess you could argue, it probably doesn't appear in nature very often unless you like doing them. But because there's no distance being traveled, there's a power output, but it's not, it doesn't have repetitions, so it's almost like an internal stress rather than the work being completed. Does that mean handstands are not very functional and not worth doing? Absolutely not, because handstands bring with them a whole raft of benefits, and those benefits will directly improve your ability to do functional work in other things. So, the shoulder health that comes with a handstand, the neurological pieces like the balance, the accuracy, um, the core strength that's required for a handstand, all that stuff is one super cool to develop just so you can get a better handstand. But also, if you develop that stuff, you are going to see a better outcome in functional movement. So if I work the handstand, I'm getting all these benefits that might carry crossover to something that is quote unquote more functional, like a thruster, because I've worked on those pieces. So this is where the challenge of programming comes in. I want to program these functional movements, but if all I do is program functional movements, I miss out on the value of some of the less functional movements, and I don't embrace variance properly. And this is why programming is so much fun, because it's awesome to do thrusters and pull ups. But if it's all you do, it's all you'll get good at. And we want to be better at just more than just thrusters and pull ups, even though thrusters and pull ups are incredibly functional because the maths tells me it is. And that's really functional movements wrapped up in a nutshell. So it's this understanding that a functional movement can move large loads, long distances quickly. If a movement can't do that, it isn't invaluable, but it isn't our top tier movement in terms of its functionality. So we would then decide where does it fit in the program based on other 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 values that it gives us. All right, that's Coach's thoughts for this week. I hope you that helped unmask functional movements a little bit for you. Cheers.